Law.
I don't know
Oh,
how.
although I cleaned out my third garage and Missy and I come up with 6 tubs of stuff to get rid of.
Okay, y'all want to take a seat? I think we have just enough chairs tonight. Okay, thanks to all of you for coming. Chet has drawn a crowd.
Scary thing.
And I asked today where the flags were, and they said they were in storage. Nancy and I found part of the flags in storage, but we couldn't find all of them. But we're still going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everybody would stand and we'll do the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And I always like to recognize our veterans. So, would our veterans stand for a moment?
I'm veteran.
It's always an honor to be around veterans. My stepdad is a veteran of Korea, and I get to hear lots of stories, so I'm reminded about veterans a lot. I guess the first thing on our agenda is the minutes from our last meeting, and Elise Calvert will give
The
us.
Sanger Area Historical Society held a public meeting at 7 p.m. on April 28th, I think it's 29th, I have a typo, 2015 at the Sanger Public Library with over 60 people in attendance. A welcome reception was held at 6:30. Pledge of Allegiance was followed by a greeting of veterans present. Minutes from the November 2014 meeting were read. Nancy Smith gave the treasurer's report. The general fund currently has $4,987.51. The money market funds had $72,899.01, plus the 4B board donation totaled $182,899.01. $37,100.99 is still needed to reach the projected cost of the $220,000 for the refurbishment of the church building. Announcements were made. The museum opened on 9/13/2014 and is accepting donations pertaining to the Sanger area. It's currently open only on Saturday from 10 to 2 due to the lack of volunteers to man it. The Denton County Courthouse Museum will be doing displays in the summer of the Denton County Museum. Tona is preparing the display for SAHS. The floor was turned over to the Reverend Henry Felder and Reverend Reginald Logan of the Galilee Missionary Baptist Church, and a panel of members consisting of Bridget Felder, Tamara Hudson, Dorothy Newbine, Wanda Newbine, Ruby Davis Watson, Geneva Jones Smith, and Peggy Haskins. Everyone joined in the singing of songs, and then the women told what it was like for them growing up in Sanger and the history of the church and the bell placed at the church. They closed the program with more songs and prayer. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. I think you were correct. I think that meeting was April the 28th.
Well, one place I have April 29th, another place I have April 28th.
I think it is the 28th. I was looking at something.
I'll go back and check it.
Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes?
Make a motion.
Bill?
Accept that, right?
We have a second?
Second.
Okay, Charlie. Okay. The next item is treasurer's report. Nancy will give us that.
The current balance in the church refurbishment building fund, this is our part of it, is $79,732.49. That's a little more than 72% of our goal, which is half, $110,000. The City of Sanger 4B Board donated $110,000, and we committed to help raise the remaining half. These funds are in a money market fund that has drawn interest of $381.48 on the deposited donations. Some of the local banks have indicated that they will donate in the future. Not many local businesses have donated. The current balance in our regular fund is $3,374.43. The income in this account is our funds come from dues, donations, and sales of our Around Sanger book and our new cookbook, Recipes and Memories from Our Heritage, and both of these are on the table. Some other books have been given to us that are available at the museum in exchange for a donation. Tote bags are also available for a donation of $5. Those who have made a donation to the building fund can come by the museum for a thank you gift. Our expenses. We donated $6,000 to the church refurbishment building fund, that money coming primarily from the sale of our pictorial history book. We have sold about 350 of those. There are expenses involved with operating the museum, although the city furnishes the building and utilities. Some of the display cases were donated to us by the Denton County Museum when they closed. Other display furniture has been purchased. We rented space in Sanger Storage at $50 per month for 11 months until this fall, when we purchased 1/3 interest in a storage building that Friends of the Library erected on city property on Railroad Avenue. We ordered 300 tote bags at a cost of $465.29, and we have paid Alpha Graphics $3,088.40 for printing 500 cookbooks. We paid $35 to join the Chamber of Commerce, and some of you were present when they had the ribbon cutting, or you saw the picture in the paper. We found a reel-to-reel tape of an interview of Tilford Wilson by Eunice Gray in about 1980. We were able to have it transferred to CD for $20. Other expenses include renting a post office box and a safety deposit box. The museum does not belong exclusively to the SAHS board members. All members are encouraged to visit it and to help by taking turns keeping it open for visitors on Saturdays from 10 to 2. We will continue to have work days at the museum bi-monthly. The next one is scheduled for February the 9th, 2016. Our primary goal is to make tables of contents for our notebooks and organize them so that the material in them may be found more easily. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, do I hear a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
I so motion.
And Joe seconds. Okay. Talking about the church, Thomas was just sharing with me some information, and he's going to tell you what happened last night.
Just briefly, the city council made its initial vote on the contract with Icon to basically contract with them to do the initial bid work and the construction management once that kicks off. And the main goal is of the bid work right now, so that we know we've got a harder number. We've been kind of dealing with guesstimates on what we think the total cost is, and so we hope that coming out of this process we'll know where we are, and maybe we're closer than we think. That's what we're going to hope, is that it comes in, because we did try to adjust when we kicked this off, add a little bit, because we knew it was going to take us some time to fundraise. So we think we built in some contingency, but costs continue to go up and the economy's heated up, so we're a little concerned there. But we have, the council voted last night to do that and enter in a contract with Icon, so we move forward.
And I think Carlos, things are happening now.
No, I was curious, when the proposal is presented as you did, will the idea be that the restoration would have been totally done, or is there a proposal to restore portion of the building to make it usable and itself become another fundraiser as partial use before all the restoration is completed?
I think all of the planned restoration, it's a complete package. So this vote is, that we took last time, was just the initial stages to see if we're totally there, because we're really close. If we're not there, we're really close. And once we know that number, we can make an informed decision about how fast we move forward. So if we're really close and the money's there, then it's meant to be a full restoration for what we intended it, what the plans called for initially. So.
And we met with the leaders of the banks, and we've got commitments from 3 of the banks. And I sent out, I think, about 50 letters to local businesses and got probably 25 of them returned because I didn't have the P.O. box on them. So I came up one day and hand-delivered all those that I could find open that day. But we got a nice $500 donation from McLean RV from these letters being sent out. And I'm still hoping that we're going to get more from the letters that were sent.
The banks have, they have talked about some levels of giving that are not necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, not necessarily reflected in the current dollars yet.
Right.
Right? So if those come through,
So we're
and
at
the bid comes in well, we're getting close.
we're like at 190,000 then. Right at 190, and if our target remains 220, I think we've got another 10 or 15, and Walmart has committed to making a donation. So we're getting there. We're getting there, and I'm glad to hear the council has engaged ICON so that we can start moving forward.
ICON was one of the other visits that was made also. The city manager and I met with
Right.
Brad Isbell on that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we got a nice donation from ICON too,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, museum update. We're open every Saturday. We would love to see every member of the society come by and look at it. Our shelves are getting pretty full. We do have storage buildings, so we're getting to the point where if people donate things, we might have to put a few things in storage for a few months and show new things, which would be better anyway. The Denton County Courthouse Museum display, they asked all the cities to participate. I think all of them, but 1 or 2 did. And our display is, they took Eileen Fuquay's mother's dress when she got married. It was her going away dress. It's quite ornate, and they have it in the display. And then they have the big rendering of the this one right here, the big rendering in the display case. But there's some interesting things there from the other communities in the county. And I believe it's supposed to be there till January 6th. So during the holidays, you might want to run by and just look at it. It's in their main display room. The cookbook has, gosh, been a great success. Nancy and Millard's daughter did most of the work. Nancy typed most of the recipes, and Lori put it together for us and did a great job. And I know a lot of you have gotten the cookbook, but I said, even if you don't like to cook, it's a good read. It's got pictures and it's got stories, and I love all the stories that go with the recipes. And that's really what we intended. We just recently reordered another 250 books, so we've already, well, the first 250 we had already made our money back and still had, I don't know, I think, 60 or 70 books left. But Alpha Graphics in Carrollton actually did the printing, and most of you probably remember Merle Yeri. Well, she works there, and she got us a really good deal, and the people that own this franchise donated $500 towards our church project. And they did it again the second time. I don't know if that was a mistake, but we took the $500. And Nancy's sending them another thank you letter. But we're going to have a table and craft show at the high school in December. So you can buy them there, you can buy them at the museum. The library is actually selling them. Linda has some at the high school. So, or you can order them, you can call one of us and we'll put it in the mail for you. I mean, they're great presents for $12. You just can't hardly buy anything for $12. I think that's all I had, and we're just so happy that Chet's going to come talk to us. When I called him to ask him about doing this, he started telling me some of the stories, and we had a great talk and laughs, and I think you're going to be real interested in hearing what he says, and we really appreciate it.
Well, first of all, I have to say I do remember having a conversation with you about speaking, and didn't really give it much of a thought until Millard called me in a few days ago, reads me the email or Facebook post you made, and it was about the speaker, and it was a great speaker, or however you put it, and I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, I thought she asked me to do it. So I asked her, I said, who did she say speaking? She said, you. And I went, wow, okay. So I'm thinking, there might be a presidential campaign that would really like for you to go to work for them, to use some copy for them. You know, I'm thinking it's almost like the movie trailers you see, and you're like, well, I've got to go see that, and then you sat through about half of it. Wow, this trailer was better than the movie, so her post may be better than the talk. But I don't really want to consider this a talk as much as a discussion almost. And of course, one thing that as I did sit down and think about it, and I thought, especially seeing most of you here this evening, I'm thinking, most time I talk about growing up in Sanger, I changed the names to protect. If you want to say the innocent, right? But no, most of the time I changed the name to protect the guilty. The innocent was okay. But I think, you know, when it came to talking about our experience at the Presbyterian Church, it's all innocent. And actually, I'm glad to have this opportunity because it did make me stop and think about the days gone by and what it meant to me. And just to start off, I guess my family, mom and dad, we became members, I want to say, in the late 60s. I can still remember going the first time to church there, and it was, you know, a little different. Obviously, an older church and small group, and of course, as years go on, well, you know, of course, we ended up building a new church, and was quite successful for quite a while for the size of the congregation. But and I think when I first started thinking about kind of what to say, my first thoughts were about the members that were there when we joined. And a lot of y'all, most of y'all will remember a lot of these folks, and you could probably even help me out. The first one that came to mind was Alma Cherry. Everybody, a lot of people remember Alma Cherry. And of course, she's a lifelong resident here and a businesswoman. And you can almost say a pioneer woman in the business world, I think. just a few feet away from where she had her beauty salon for years and years. The one thing I found interesting that I remember when we had the basically the little ceremony when the Presbyterian came down and we basically closed the church, we had a moderator from Dallas come down, and we were all in a little circle, and he was giving his little presentation. And one of the things he pointed out, and I think this might be important, especially for this group, he said, you know, this church was somewhat of a trendsetter. And one of the things that he mentioned was when Alma Cherry was an ordained elder, and she was possibly, and I want to say, and I can't remember, say 1946, I may be wrong about that. He said that was the first year that they allowed women to be elders. He said she could have been the first, if one of the first, if not the first elder, because he had the dates, obviously. And of course, to me, that's just awesome when you think about it. That right here in Sanger, Texas, we had a trendsetter, you know, and she was a staple in this community, and I'll never forget about her. But and also I think about her mother. And it was always, and I asked Richard about this the other night. I called him up and asked him, I said, do you remember Mrs. Cherry's first name, her mother? Richard said his grandmother lived across the street, and his grandmother was a few years behind her, but it was Mrs. Cherry to her too. So it was Mrs. Cherry. But she was, I would say she would be the oldest member at the time, probably well in her 80s, maybe early 90s. So she possibly could have been one of the members in 1902. Because I do remember a story that she told, or Alma told, I don't remember, about when Mrs. Cherry moved to Texas and they came in a covered wagon. Now I want to say from Missouri. So that was, I was also before 1902 probably, but she comes to mind. Andy and Jessie Bell Barrentine, a lot of folks will remember them. Jessie Bell was Alma's sister. And Andy had retired from a major oil company and moved back to Sanger. And they lived right next to Alma. Alfred and Mrs. Burks. I can't remember her name either.
Billy Catherine.
That was the daughter.
Yeah.
You're ahead of me. You're ahead of me. But yeah, he was a dairyman, and his farm was where the school is now.
I think her name is Una.
Una? Okay, well, thank you. There you go. I don't know if I ever knew, or it was always Mrs. Burke to me. So, but Billy Catherine. If you didn't have an opportunity to be acquainted with Billy Catherine, you kind of missed something. Probably the top Christmas card salesman that ever hit Sanger, Texas. Because, you know, she had some struggles in her life, but she could sell those Christmas cards. And I was thinking about her driving all over town, and I'm sure she never had a driver's license, but it didn't matter. And of course, last and not least, but Don and Winnie Boots, who was the lay pastor. Don was lay pastor. I had the opportunity to visit with him a week or so ago. Don is 92 years old now. Winnie passed away just a couple years ago or so, and it was great because I got to tell him, you know, I think as you get older, you really appreciate the people that you've had in your life that made an impact on you. And I was able to tell him that. And, you know, Don was a carpenter. I would say a top-line carpenter. He basically built a new church. He and Andy Barrentine and Dad, and of course I was a little bit too small to do a whole lot, but I'm sure I got in the way some. But we talked quite a bit about that. And I was curious about the church. You know, I asked him, I said, well, the fact that you were a lay pastor, and he goes, well, yeah, he goes, I was a member of the St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, and the pastor asked, said, can you come up to Sanger and fill the pulpit? Just do a lesson. The pastor's getting elderly, and they need a pastor to fill the pulpit, and, you know, just temporarily, just go up and give a little lesson. And I said, so all those years later, you were still considered yourself temperate? He said, that's right. So he did that and eventually moved to Sanger. He and Wendy moved to Sanger and lived here for several years before they moved back to Denton in that different area. And just, I've got to say this, just if you remember Don, I can remember I was his, most of the time I was the youth department at the Presbyterian Church. And he was my Sunday school teacher. And wow, I mean, you just don't, as you look back, you just don't get an opportunity to do that. And because he was a man of the Bible, and he preached straight from the Bible, and literally we would spend a couple of weeks sometimes on 3 or 4 verses, you know, and just, and the fact that he considered himself just trying to teach the word. He didn't consider himself a preacher, he didn't consider himself a teacher. And I think that was very important to me. But, you know, Don, he never talked about it, and it didn't really have anything to do, I guess, with the Presbyterian Church, but I think it does because it obviously had an impact on me in the church. He would talk about being a Marine, and he was in World War II and at Iwo Jima. And he and one other man in his company were the only 2 that survived. And we talked about that a little bit, and what an impact that made on his life. And of course, we've all seen the movies and the TV shows and read about it, but just to be able to talk to someone who experienced it. But anyway, so that was kind of the members, and I may miss some. There was some that come and go. I asked Don, I said, well, what, how was it? And he goes, well, the problem was he wasn't an ordained pastor. So anything that had to be officially done through the church, they had to have an ordained minister come in. And he said, our moderator was the pastor at St. Andrew's Church. And he said, he had no interest in it. In helping us is basically what and he was pretty frank about it. He said, the Presbytery let us down. And I think he got frustrated. I think he finally, you can only go so long and feel like you're spinning your wheels. And I feel like that's what he thought at the time, and there's a reason he probably resigned as pastor when he did. We did have a pastor after him that was ordained pastor, Jim Carter. He was actually married to Lou and I. But he lived in Denton. And, it's that takes a little bit away from it when the pastor does live in the community and be a part of the community. And Don did mention, he goes, it went up there, he said, I came to Sanger and we did a service, and there's a few people there. And he said, but I kept coming back. He said, people just started coming. He's like, he was surprised. And I thought, well, Don, have you ever listened to yourself? That's why people come. And he still does the jail ministry at 92 years old at the Cook County, Denton County Jail every once a week. And I'm like, wow, that's something we should all strive just to be a little bit of that dedicated. So I don't know, actually, as I was thinking about it, I thought about the building and going in as a youngster, 10 years old or 11. And it's almost like a set on a black and white movie. Because you walk in, even at that age, it was just something you didn't see anymore. Even in the 60s, it was something that was, most churches had moved to more modern buildings and better facilities. And but it's funny because I can close my eyes, and in my mind's eye, I can still walk right through the interior of that church. And I don't know, I thought I'd just cover that just a little bit because I know it hasn't been this way in quite a while. You go up the steps, you walk into a small foyer, and it'd be the classrooms off to your right, which, if I remember right, they had divided into 2 rooms. And in the little foyer was where the rope came down through the ceiling, where the rope hang that rang the bell. And then as you continue into the sanctuary, a couple of things that really sticks out in my mind to this day is the floor and the way the floor is slanted toward the pulpit. And that size of building, you just don't see that, I don't think, or at least I haven't. So it was slanted to the pulpit and the choir, little choir seating area, not a loft because it was directly behind the pulpit, was elevated. And off to the right on the floor would be the piano. upright piano that had at least 2 or 3 keys that stuck really bad. And I used that as an excuse. And I told God, I said, you remember I was a church pianist when I was 11 or 12 years old? He goes, oh, I remember it well. I said, well, if you remember, I was taking lessons from my sister Sherry, and Dad volunteered me when we didn't have a pianist that Chet would do it. Chet can do it. So from that period on, every week I had a piano lesson, and every morning at 6 o'clock I got up from 6 to 6:30 and practiced the piano, and I learned nothing but hymns. And I told God, I said I don't want to say I despised him, but I did not enjoy it. And he goes, I know you did. Sure. I said, well, I can still remember the first hymn that I learned. And he kind of looked at me and we talked about it. He kind of grinned about the same time I did, and I think he was thinking the same thing I was thinking. It was Wonderful Words of Life. And the first service, the one I played on was Wonderful Words of Life. The next week, I played Wonderful Words of Life and one other song. And the third week, I played Wonderful Words of Life. And he smiled. He knew I was doing that. But that old piano is obviously pretty vivid in my memory. As I stand there and like I say, visualize the sanctuary, the room, off to the left on the west wall, on the southwest corner, was the attendance board. And of course, as I got a little older, it kind of became my job that whoever would count the money and say, "With $43.30. So I would go through the cards and slide them in, and attendance, 28, 43, whatever. But thinking about it, even as a kid, I'm thinking, I'd look up that board and it would say, attendance today. And it would have a number. Offering today, it would have an amount. And then under it would say, attendance last week, had a number. Offering last week, and have a number. And I would look at that and I'm thinking, today was actually last week, which means, so last week meant, when you got there, it wasn't today, it was last week, which meant the week before. And I would probably be thinking about things like that instead of actually what God was preaching about. But because we only had one service a week, and that was it. And so I guess if you didn't turn around to look as you walked out the door that afternoon, you wouldn't know what the attendance was that day. So actually, I should have said this moment. But anyway, like I say, this is. And then I guess I get to thinking about things that happened there, experiences, things that I remember. And I wrote down experiences. And the one thing that I remember well was one of the things that I enjoyed doing, looking forward to every week, was I got to ring the bell. And you would pull that rope and the bell would swing and you'd go back and you'd pull it, you'd have to have a little timing down. And when that bell would ring, as it would go from one side to the other, I can remember well. And I asked him Don about this, and he said, I remember this too. That whole bell tower and that whole end of that building would just quiver. And so before we actually moved out of the building, we quit ringing the bell. And I think one Sunday, I think it actually came off the pulley. But as far as the bell goes, it also, when they built a new church, which the city has possession of the bell now, it'd be great to have that incorporated, obviously, some form or fashion, whether it's in a bell tower or not, I don't know. But I remember Dad, of course, he had some connections and a little pull, I guess, but he had Brazos Electric Company when they had an office down here. And I can remember going to school one morning, and he was up on with the cherry picker with one of the linemen, and they were getting that bell out of that church, and I remember that well. Just like I had never seen the bell. I rung it, but I'd never seen it, so it was pretty neat experience. I got thinking, and I don't never remember being hot, getting hot. It wasn't air conditioned, obviously. I don't never remember being hot, but I do remember some of the services in the wintertime being relatively cool. And, when nobody takes their jackets and their wraps off, so that kind of stands out in my mind. But it was heated. I remember a stove in the front corner and one in the back corner. But and then I got thinking, well, what else comes to mind? And one thing that came to mind was, I guess, see what I put down, the surprise of 2 impromptu unknown speakers came in one day at different times. And one gentleman got up right as the service ended. I didn't know him, ended rather. And he got up and was basically going to go start a second sermon for us. And of course, I'm like I say, 10 or 12 years old. I'm like, whoa. But I remember Don shut him down pretty quick. And I don't remember what he was saying or anything. But I do remember one other gentleman came in. And as everyone stood up at the end of the service, and how we all talk and greet each other as we get ready to leave, well, he made an announcement, and I was probably the closest to him. And I guess kind of going back to the church building, when you walked into the sanctuary, most of the seating was on the right, in which we were basically a small number, we never filled it up. So most of us all sat in there, but there was also some seating on the left that was much narrower rows. And he was sitting back there, which was kind of unusual, of course. And he got up and basically warned us of the impending nuclear disaster, end of the world. And then he was gone, out the door. And of course, being 10 or 12 years old, I'm following him. I'm looking, and the only thing I can tell you is he drove a 54 Chevrolet. And he hit it dark on 7th Street. But anyway, and like I say, I don't know anything else I can say, but it was quite the experience to move from that church into the new church. The one thing, as far as the new church at the time, community center now, and I didn't ask this, Don just said, well, when I built that church, he said, I talked to my bricklayer, and he said, I want a cross put in. He said, can you put in a cross, in the brick? And he said, if you can design it, I can build it. And so Don made a pattern out of wood, and I'm sure they put the pattern up, and he bricked around the pattern, and then basically, I think, turned the brick a different way. And Don said, I knew someday this probably wouldn't be a church, but he goes, it'll always have a cross on it. And he said, and if it doesn't have a cross on it, it means they tore it down. So, as I'm thinking about this day and time that we're all experiencing when we watch the news and read the papers, with the situation that we have now, facing people of faith, I think that, it's one thing, kind of a little party thing, and I kind of want a discussion because I know y'all can probably help me out a lot more, but I guess I can say, I was fortunate to grow up in Salem. I've always thought that. And the more I think about it, I was blessed to be a member of the Presbyterian Church. And I think if y'all can say that about your experience as growing up as a young person, I think it really means something to you as you get older. And it does now to me for sure. And I'm thinking with that being said, like I said, with the modern world being what it is, I think we have an opportunity, that you have an opportunity here with the restoration of the church, and I hope that it can be an opportunity to display what the Christian faith meant to this community, and what the foundation it was in this community. Not only for us now, but especially for those that are coming after us, because I think that's going to be something we're going to see less and less, as time goes on here, unfortunately, unless something changes. And I think to me, that's, once again, as I get older, that's almost one of the more exciting parts about it, that maybe we can do that. Now, I do have a couple of things that I want to show, and the little box says Little Debbie, And Kyle thought, oh boy, extra snacks. Well, there's no little bitty snacks in there. But I would like to share it with you, and it's almost like a show and tell. But basically, it's, I guess you could say it's a show and give, or show and donate. It's something that I would like, you know, for especially with the church, that we can, maybe it's something you use in the museum, but especially I want to use in the church. But so I guess before we get there, feedback, because there may be something I've totally missed, or something y'all have experienced.
I have a question. Do you know what happened to the pews in the church?
When, somewhat, because it was several years later, I say several years, a couple years or so at least, it was the library. So when it was made into the library, of course the pews came out. And I can remember whoever did, you know, the remodel, just dump them out there on the north side on the lot, the yard. And Dad knew it, and most of them were busted up. I guess all of them were busted up now that I think about it. You know, apart. They were probably knocked them apart to get them out the easier. And we got several of them at the time. And I have no earthly idea what Dad used them for, but that is where they're gone. They're gone. I do know that. The pulpit, I don't know. I was kind of hoping that maybe it had survived some way, somewhere. I don't know. I mean, the other thing I think that is interesting that you might want to look into, the attendance and offering board that I mentioned, we moved it to the new church. So it was in the new church when it was, so maybe it's in a storage closet or something. And it, you know, it was just like you used to see in the churches. Had a little, if I remember, I had a little scroll work at the top. It was very plain, very Unitarian, but the pews I know are gone.
Well, no, the library has a display case that they want to donate to the Historical Society / Presbyterian Church
Right.
building. And, you know, I think kind of what we envision is this cabinet with especially memorabilia about the church.
Right. I was hoping you would say that. I was hoping that would be the case. Which, if anybody else has anything, speak up, because, like I say, I'm not, all this was just off memory. So, the one thing we have here that Don Boots brought to me several years after the church closed. We'd already moved to Cook County. And he came up one day and he gave me this, and he said, I feel like this is something that you would understand or appreciate more than anybody else. And I think the church had presented it to him when he left the church. And basically, and I, you know, like I say, it's not something that's 100 years old or what, but it's basically the communion server that they used. And I know we used that in our old church. And the one thing that I remember, and I was talking about it, I said, if I remember right, and you can see these are the little communion cups like we'll still use today. I thought they were glass, and the more we look at them, they are plastic. But when we first started going there, and we would have communion, I remembered the glasses being different. They were small glasses, but they were all different. You know, most of them were different. They were just glass, little small glasses. And I think somebody decided we needed to get modern. And I think Alfred Burks then cut this pattern out, looks like out of a piece of paneling, and so it would fit the cups. So that's kind of the story behind that. But, and then, you know, it's, I don't know if this would be from the 40s, I would say at least. Actually it says U.S. patent November 5, 95. So I don't think that was 1995. So that could be 1895 and another one on 96, January 20. It's a Canadian company. Page, I can't tell it all, but something, Page Individual Community Cup, something. So, but obviously, it was in the church, it was used in the church. And if that's something that, I would rather for it to go here than, you know, than stay in my house. And there was something put on it, and the more I look at it, it looked like something had been laid on it that was maybe hot at some point. And probably, if you really want to do justice, it probably needs to go through somebody who really can restore wood. In the Bible, at the time, the pulpit Bible, I remember it well. And it was an old Bible, it wasn't this one. And it was so old, and when you opened it, it would take up the whole pulpit, like this one would, you opened it up. It would basically take up the whole inside of the pulpit. And being a member of the youth department, that Bible was so old that you really couldn't hardly turn the pages. I don't think any of the pastors really ever used it, it was just there. And we had fundraisers, and I think basically we just brought our nickels and dimes and quarters, and there was 3 or 4 or 5 of us at any particular time. And we raised money to buy a new pulpit Bible, which is this one, which, like I say, it's no big deal, and I was sure hoping when I opened it up it would say when it was presented, but no such luck. But I know Judy Self, she was at one of the meetings here a year or so ago. Sammy, her daughter, was a little younger than me, and I know that Judy might even remember it's possible where that comes from. So like I say, now the original pulpit Bible, the moderator I spoke about earlier, he had that Bible, and I remember him looking at it and saying, "This is history." And he said, "I'm taking this back to Dallas. We have a special vault." So I asked Don about it, and he goes, "I hope so." And I said, he really was a little bit like, he just wasn't. I think, even all those years ago, he still harbored just a little resentment that he wished he could have been helped a little more here. And he goes, I said, "You don't think it ended up in a yard sale?" He goes, "You never know." So, but I really think that it is, in the hands of the Presbyterian and the Dallas Presbyterian, and I really have a feeling that you might could get, if you could get that Bible, that would be, when you talk about display, that would,
But their what, state headquarters, region headquarters is in Dallas?
well, it's been a long time since I've been Presbyterian, because when we closed the Presbyterian Church that night on a Sunday evening, the moderator said, I remember this well too, Belu had come and joined the church. We were married, and I think Aaron was just a baby. So what would have been, what we closed the church? Had to be something after 1981, probably 1982 maybe. And as it went around the group, each couple or person would say, "Well, I want my membership transferred to Denton, Cumberland or St. Andrews or wherever, or to Gainesville." And here I am, 21 or 2 years old, and when he got to me, which I was an elder at 18, and okay, I don't think that's why the church failed. But I do remember when the moderator did speak about Alma, he did mention the fact that I was ordained at 18 in 1976, and that was the first year that, if I remember right, he said, "You possibly could have been the youngest elder." I don't know. That was a long time ago he said that, obviously. But when he got to us, he got to me and he said, "Where do you want your membership transferred?" And I said, "I don't want mine transferred anywhere." And I remember he looked at me like, "Oh," And I said, "Well, I'm a Christian before I'm a Presbyterian, and I really believe that I really need to stay in the community." And he said, "I agree with you." He said, "Anything you need from us, So it's been a long time since I've been a Presbyterian. But the Dallas Presbyterian is like, Richard or Colin help me out here, or Joe, but like the Southern Baptist Association has a district or region, and that's basically what that would be. So I bet if you research Dallas Presbyterian, I think you can track it down.
Well, we thought about asking for a donation from them too.
Well, and that's the thing. See, most of the time now, that's one thing Don said to me. He said, looking back, he said, "I wish we would have been able to just buy that property from the Presbyterian Church or the Presbytery and make it a community church." it is what it is, and I think it's great now. I think it's being used in a really, good way. So but I can understand where he's coming from. I just think, well, at the time, even when they donated the land and then later the church to the city, I know Dad worked pretty extensively on getting the presbytery to vote to basically give it, allow that to be done. If we just closed the church and boarded up the doors, the Presbyterian Church would have owned the building, even though they had nothing to do with the fundraising and the contributions. So I think there's a way, is what I'm saying. So if he could get that done then, I really think that you could probably maybe get some really neat things, or at least the Bible. That's the only thing I remember going. But the one thing that I did find, and that's probably the neatest thing, and by the way, Lauren asked me when I got started, she goes, "Is Betty Lou the timekeeper?" And I said, when she gets up to leave, and Norma gets up to leave behind her, then Lauren reminded me that Betty Lou probably had a second set of keys to the truck, so I'm right behind him. But let's see, I did find a couple things. This was going through Mom's stuff. She passed away in 2011, and she had a lot of stuff put back. This was in this folder, and one of the things that I found was a Sunday school record book. And looking at it from 1919, 1920, 1921, 1922. And of course it looks like it. And that wasn't me that did that. But it's got people listed. And this is the Sunday school record book, so it's not the church record book. But the Reverend Envy, I don't know if it's Barker or Baker, Mrs. George Moore, there's a Mrs. Burkholder, Velma Burkholder. And so there's names listed here that I think, and also what they have, each one, what they brought in, 58 cents, $1.18. It's present, the whole thing. And so anyway, I thought that was, the more I looked at that, it's pretty awesome. So anybody wants to look at that, but I really think this is something that needs to be kept here. Now, another thing I was really surprised about, and this was to the session of the St. Presbyterian Church, and it has our address when we live on Route 2. So this is obviously handling the, I think what reason they got this was handling the deed work for the donation to the city. And what I found was the original deed to that property. I've got to be real careful here. Let's see, where I'm looking at now. 2000, let's see. Somewhere I saw, this says January 22nd, 1908. I thought somewhere I saw 1902, but I may be wrong. But this is the bond and mortgage where they released it. So this is definitely something I think would be a great display of it. And I'm glad it got put back in the folder where I found it later. Because most of the stuff we have, and this kind of, this letter in 1982 basically explains that this is the original deed, this clearance, which we had to have, I think they had to have this in order to have the trans, to be able to donate the land to the city. So basically that's it. If that's something that we can leave now, that's great. If it's something that we need to keep with us and bring back at a better date, but I'm whatever y'all think. If we have a nice place for it here, that's safety.
Well, my feeling is we could put it in the museum.
Yeah.
The Methodist Church donated their communion tray with
Okay.
a chalice, and we've got that in one of our display
Well, good.
cases. And yeah, we put them in locked cabinets.
Good. Well, I think that's where it needs to come, where it needs to go, and where it needs to stay. And there's just a couple of other letters y'all can look through here. This was in 1982. Actually, with the agreement, apparently originally, and I do remember it vaguely, originally we were going to donate 2 acres. There's 4 acres in the property, I believe I'm right about that. It would be the park now. There's 2 acres. The church wanted to give 2 acres to the city to make a park. And then it was $8,000 to build a building, like a activities type building. And it basically describes that and that kind of thing. So it's probably not quite as historically important, but still important. But anyway, that's it. If anybody has anything to add or something that I probably left out, which I know I have, because I noticed Norma's getting fidgety. And Kyle realizes now there's no Little Debbie snacks. That's why he's sitting by the table with us. That's right. But I do appreciate the opportunity to come. And, I really consider it an honor to be able to talk about that and for everyone to be here.
How long was Reverend Cunningham a pastor?
I don't know because he was not there when I came. He was. I'm sure he was the pastor that Don was talking about.
He was there in 46, I guess, 45, 46,
Yeah.
because his wife was teaching school.
Okay. Well, I just because I remember the name, but I don't remember. I don't remember him personally or ever meeting him. And that would stand to reason. So he very well may have pastored for 30 or 40 years there. I don't know if there's anybody in between there or not. But I think that's one thing, if you can go through the presbytery, you'd think they had a record. And I think maybe in that pulpit Bible, they probably had a record of the pastorship. But it was an old leather Bible. I'd almost venture to say it had to be, maybe when the church was built new, they got a new pulpit Bible. They had a new pulpit. I don't know.
When we did the Around Sanger book, there's a picture in there that was found in the walls of the church. And it was folded up, and they had someone in Denton to work on the photo, and the man in the middle, you couldn't see him at all, and so the man that digitized the photo, he claimed he took pieces of all the other men and made a face for this man. But it's real interesting because
After, put hair on him?
Yeah. After the book came out, we had a section of the early physicians of Sanger.
Uh-huh.
And there was a Dr. Gocher. And, Gocher. We were calling him Gotcher. But we met someone that said, no, it was Gocher.
Okay.
And he left practicing medicine and became a preacher and went to Chicago.
Oh, really?
And I can't remember now, maybe Nancy remembers, but somewhere along the way, somebody told us that the practice back in the good old days is whoever was responsible for building the church, getting it together, would take a picture of the group of men and they would put it in the walls of the church. And this picture was found there. But somebody mentioned that this Dr. Gocher appeared to be one of the men in the picture. And so it makes sense that he went on to become a minister, and maybe he was one of the original people to start the church. But, we've put that picture in the paper, and it's in our book, and no one has ever been able to tell us anything about it.
Yeah, I imagine that may be difficult, but somebody may come across something someday that can...
There's a photograph somewhere in the archives in this town, and I bet it was in your book or you have it, but someone made a picture of that church early in its, soon after it was built, looking to the northwest. And it's like it's out on the prairie. It seems like there's a little bit of a house to the right of it, but to the left of it, it's just nothing.
I have seen that picture.
And now, do you have that photograph in your collection of things that,
There's like no shrubbery around it, there's nothing. It looked like it could be set in the West Texas.
absolutely.
Yeah, is what it looked like, yeah. There's no cars, no, you usually see a buggy or a horse type, there was nothing to that.
I don't recall seeing it, but
I'm gonna leave this up here so if anybody wants to take a look at it, rather than try to pass it around. Nancy, well, I think Nancy.
Well, I was, same thing that Tom was telling about, but when, after that picture had been found, we were trying to decide who it was, what it was all about, and Neil Armstrong and Helen Bounds and Fran Abelson and I went down to Las Colinas to the Synod, Presbyterian Synod.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't find out anything about the picture, but we were able to take some pictures of some old records
Okay.
from the church building.
Good.
We've got copies,
So we know they're
pictures.
there.
Uh-huh.
So I think it might be, I still think that you might be surprised at what you might get donated, the fact that it's, I think anybody that looks at what you're doing here is gonna be impressed. And I think that I would hope that they will be part of it.
I was going to mention, when we were first, second, third grade, no, Elizabeth, and myself, because I was right ahead of her, and probably Nancy, you remember going over and having music in that building?
For school, during school,
During school, so our music teacher,
golly, even way back then that piano was there.
don't remember the piano.
That's because Elizabeth was there.
I think Miss Davis was the teacher.
Did you take it there?
Yes.
Did you really? Okay. See.
We just walked across, you know. And
Yeah.
Oh,
Do you remember it like I described it? You don't remember the key sticking?
That's at my house now.
why didn't they get Billy Roy playing that
Well-
piano?
I think if I remember right, when we started going to church, attending services, Melinda Laguerre, Angus, was the pianist. And she was, she used to have been in high school when we were in 5th or 6th grade?
She graduated 60.
68.
Okay, so just about that time. And she would come and do the songs and do the service, but not, if I remember right, she would leave because I guess she would go to her church. And that would be the end of the music. Billy Roy then, I think, at the time was living in Denton because he graduated in, we don't even talk about
67.
it. We don't want to talk about it. Were you in his grade?
No, I was a year ahead.
Okay.
I graduated 60.
See, I was thinking you were in his grade, but whoever, it didn't matter what grade I was always pestering him, of course. But, so he was living in Denton, but he did come back and would play. And then he went into the National Guard and went into training. And that's when I got volunteered. So he had a real sharp tenure. And the one thing I do remember about that, like I said, I didn't want to do it. It was not fun to me. It wasn't anything fun to play. And Billy will tell you, I don't know when we got married I was still doing it or not. I may have, Barbara Brady, they had moved into the area, Fred and Barbara, and she was a great pianist. And so I was more than happy to.
She probably knew more than one song.
Wait a minute. By that time I knew a few songs. But until I learned the doxology, I do remember this. I would do the first 2 or 3 songs or whatever we did, and then when it came time to take the offering, I'd get up and go take the offering. We'd sing the acapella of the doxology come down, and then I'd go sit and we'd do another song. But, so eventually I learned the doxology too. But well, I was just going to say, no. When Billy will tell you, when I turned that over to her, that was it. And until just recently, I started playing the mandolin a little bit. And I'm thinking, and then I remember Mom saying, we made a mistake. That's what she said one time. She said, we made a mistake by making you do that, because it took the fun out of it. Where Sherry and Bill Roy, they enjoyed playing. Dad played and sang. We all I just remember that. It was just work. It was just a job, and you had to get up at 6:30, and if you didn't do that, you had to play in the afternoon when you got home. And I'd lots rather have been running up and down the creek or playing ball or something. And so, but I would have, if you need a pianist, I'll volunteer Norman's ankle. Lauren did. But anyway, that's, I'm getting this back side. Actually, I'm trying to.
Carlos would like the board members to come up and get a picture with Chet. Come on up.
This letter goes. This letter goes.
You know what, I bet they got a mortgage and they paid off.
Yeah, it probably was, and I think something I saw, it was $600.
And that bird color was in the bird
Okay.
color, you know.
I think this cherry's name is Nanny.
Nanny.
That's what I was
You
thinking.
know what, I think that's what my name is. First she said Nanny.